As it's famously been said, space is the final frontier. But the importance of space is now being underlined by Ottawa. Last week, the defense minister announced Canada's first commercial space launch pad is being constructed in Nova Scotia, touting it as a cornerstone of this country's defense capabilities.
Today's space is no longer the benign environment we once hoped it would be. Nor is it an emerging domain. It has emerged. It's here and incredibly important. Our adversaries are developing technologies that can be used in space to disrupt or destroy satellites. They're also leveraging artificial intelligence and quantum to threaten the technology that underpins our economy, our sovereignty, and our security. That's why Canada recognizes space as an operational domain, right alongside sea, land, air, and cyber.
It's also why Canada has a group called 3 Canadian Space Command, keeping an eye on who has what assets or weapons in space. Joining us now is its commander, Brigadier-General Christopher Horner. Sir, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Let's start with the importance of space defense, especially in light of what's happening globally.
So space is becoming more and more known as an important domain of operations, both for the Canadian forces, but also for Canadians. We are a giant country and we are enabled by technology that rests in space. GPS functions to enable everything from food delivery to come to your house to the precision farming required to harvest that food and grow it for Canadians. The timing that comes from space signals ensures all of our financial transactions are secure in this country. So space is becoming a relevant, or is a relevant backbone, and is now really becoming part of the conversation as what is critical infrastructure for Canada and how do we ensure its safety and security.
And as far as turning towards the future, what sort of future buildup is Canada looking at?
So, in Strong, Secure and Engaged, which was defense policy of 2017 and then reaffirmed in Our North Strong and Free in 2024, is the focus on the mission areas that I spoke about. But fundamentally, about a $26 billion investment in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms to enable the joint force to move forward into the next generation for Canada. Also increasing our ability to access satellite communications, specifically focused on the Arctic or the high north. Current satellite communications don't work great up there, so looking at a project to develop that capability for Canada, for the Canadian forces, to enable us to communicate and operate in the high north is a priority. And then finally, space domain awareness. And that is building that catalog and understanding of everything that is in space so that we can best detect and best understand what the threats are to Canadian sovereignty, security, and then be able to take action if required to ensure we protect the economic prosperity of this country.
You mentioned the high north, incredibly important, especially now. What are the most urgent needs that Canada has to focus on there right now?
From a space perspective in the high north, a lot of the satellite communication infrastructure is designed to get us to about 70 degrees north, which is inside the Arctic Circle, but not all the way to the top of the archipelago. So looking at communications infrastructure to enable operations forward in the Arctic to ensure that we have the ability to communicate with our forces all the way to Canadian Forces Station Alert, which is right at the top of Canada. On top of that, it's introducing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms that operate from space to allow us to detect threats to Canada or encroachments on our sovereignty in the Arctic and in the surrounding waters that approach Canada. Those are two of the critical areas that we're focused on so that we can have that real-time surveillance and we can have that communication system, those communication systems, that are in place to enable our forces to go forward.
And let's look at the other side of that equation. What are the current capabilities of potential rivals?
So when I talk about those mission areas that we have, a lot of potential adversaries or potential rivals have very similar capabilities, but also or counter space capabilities. In 2021, as an example, Russia launched a anti-satellite weapon system, which blew up one of their defunct old satellites. What that did was create a huge field of debris and put a cascading effect of threats to other satellites, including the International Space Station. So we're seeing adversaries developing systems that can deny entire areas of space, entire orbital regimes, as we call it, by detonating or blowing things up. And that's why we focus on, the intentional use of space from a sovereignty and security perspective to ensure we can protect our freedom of movement or freedom of action or exploration even when we look at space. As an example, you have Colonel Jeremy Hansen, an astronaut from Canada, from the Royal Canadian Air Force, who's with Canadian Space Agency. And he is tied to the Artemis II mission, which unfortunately is slightly delayed, but will eventually take off this year. And that will be the first time a Canadian gets to go and circle the moon and return home. And that is a fundamentally changing thing for Canada and our ability to do deep space exploration. And that's possible through collaboration and through the work we're doing with multiple countries. So when we see threats to our ability to operate or do space exploration, those are the things that concern me.
Obviously, it makes sense that we're sharing because space is incredibly expensive, but are there concerns about relying too much on the U.S. to supply equipment?
So the Defense Industrial Strategy that was released specifies that space capabilities will be sovereign capabilities for this country. And I think that's a fantastic way to move forward because there's a capability, there are multiple capabilities that we can develop here in Canada. We have great space companies and we're moving forward with investment. $183 million was announced in the budget towards sovereign launch capability. That gives Canada its own assured access to space. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, we will become less and less reliant on others because methodically, we can plan and work towards putting our own assets and our own capabilities in space. There will always be a shared element of what we do with multiple like-minded partners and multiple like-minded nations as we look at how to ensure the responsible use of space. But the Defense Industrial Strategy mixed with the budget announcements around sovereign launch put us on a trajectory to have sovereign capabilities for the space domain here in Canada.
Last question, sir. Earlier, you mentioned Jeremy Hansen. Are you a bit jealous about him going into space?
So there's a joke that Jeremy and I tell each other. Both of us started astronaut selection. He succeeded and he's going around the moon. I failed and I'm still his boss. So the excitement here is I'm super jealous of Jeremy. He's going on to do something that no Canadian has ever done. I mean, that is a fantastic galvanizing moment for this country, and I couldn't be prouder to watch him do it.
Commander, thank you for your time.
No problem.